What's up, Crowdfunding Nation? Salvador Brigman here, and thank you so much for listening to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Whether it's your first time tuning into this, you're like, why is this guy talking so quickly? Why is he so passionate about crowdfunding? What is this whole crowdfunding business? Or you've been listening to me for years. Every once in a while, we'll run into someone in person who listens to the podcast or one of my YouTube videos. It's always such a cool experience knowing that some of y'all, have launched multiple products with your Kickstarter and your crowdfunding campaigns and still come back to this show as a source of information. Thank you so much for your time, energy, and attention. And on this show, I try to really not only demystify crowdfunding, but get into what's working behind the scenes. Because in the early days, back in 2015, when I launched this show in Brooklyn, New York, I had people all the time come up to me and be like, I didn't know this crowdfunding thing could actually work. Like, how is it that this campaign was so overfunded and raised 6 or 7 figures online? Like, I just don't get it. And I experienced that, in 2012 when I first entered the industry and really started to understand what actually was working behind the scenes and share this on my blog. And I wanted to share that with you by having real world individuals, entrepreneurs, creators, designers come on this podcast, and you can hear it as a fly on the wall. No matter if you're just going out there and you're doing a run, you're listening to the show on the go, you're cleaning your room, maybe you're doing something else at the same time, right? You can still be downloading this information into your head, or you're a student of the craft. You're a student of crowdfunding in the same way that I have been my entire life, for the most part, and you're really taking notes, right, at the exact same time. So first of all, in this episode, I'm going to go out there and say, I think this is one of the best episodes that we've had the privilege of recording in a while. And the reason why is that, today's guest, which is so incredibly transparent and had such a great ethical approach to producing an incredible product that changes the game, that's innovative, and then also has a great approach when it comes to design. And he was actually willing to just share that very candidly in terms of what worked to get funding, what he did in order to move and get momentum with his project, how he was able to get to $155,000 plus on Kickstarter. And you're just going to be able to listen to that for free and be able to gobble that up. Take that inspiration when it comes to those tactics that he's sharing, those lessons, those nuggets of gold, and apply that to your campaign. And if you are an inventor, a designer, you want to create your own physical product, I also really think you're going to like today's episode, because today's guest went into the step-by-step process that he used in order to develop his first physical product from scratch. So really cool. Lots of great information in today's episode. And before we get into it, I think that this is a great opportunity where if you're really sinking your teeth into a new body of knowledge, I think it makes sense just to go all in. And sometimes it's like drinking from the fire hose, right? But the more you surround yourself with not only success stories like this, but also what works from a step-by-step perspective to get to where you want to go, to get the results you're looking for in terms of launching a business, launching your campaign, getting funding, building a tribe, having worldwide attention for your brand, the better off you're going to be. So a great resource for that is to go and check out my free course on Kickstarter. Now, this is not necessarily just a basic course. I really go into the ins and outs of what works to pull the levers that are going to allow you to get funding quickly, build momentum, get traffic attention, and rack up those pledges and those backers. So go and check out this free course at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter. That link is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter. That link will take you there. Just enter your name and email and you can join that free course. Or if you're one of those students out there, students of the craft who really want to, understand from a nuts and bolts, detail-oriented perspective, you want to open up and crack open a book. You want to break open a book and you want to shred that book to pieces and come away with tons of information and knowledge, you got to go and check out my book, The Kickstarter Launch Formula. There's an Audible version for that. You can actually get a free 30-day trial of Audible. You get a free copy of the Kickstarter Launch Formula at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. And I'll include that link in the show notes at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. One word, Kickstarter audio. And you can go and check that out and download a free copy of the Kickstarter Launch Formula. Without further ado, let's dive into this episode and discover how this individual was able to raise $155,896,000 plus on Kickstarter. It's coming up right after this. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Today we are lucky enough to be speaking with a creator who has surpassed the 144K mark on Kickstarter, more than 1,200 backers for a radically unique, new, and interesting e-ink display for your favorite apps and news. We're lucky enough to have a member of the team here today. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Salvador, for having me.
Definitely. Maybe we can get started and you can just kind of describe a bit about your product to the audience and also fill in some gaps in the introduction in terms of who you are.
Sure. Well, our product is called TRMNL. And like you mentioned, it's an e-ink display. It's about 7.5 inches wide, sits on your desk, and connects to different products you use to hopefully keep out some of that blue light or doom scrolling or just all the notification chaos that a lot of us seem to have from our inboxes and our phones. And this is really my first foray into hardware. I've been in software for my whole career, if you even want to call it that. I've been working as a marketer at Techstars, YC, et cetera, venture-backed companies. And then I transitioned into being a founder and kind of self-taught developer for the last 5-6 years. And so, I've had some wins, I've had some losses, but TRMNL is something I'm able to build for me and hopefully connect with a lot of other folks who also, need something like this. And like you mentioned on Kickstarter, it's been resonating really well so far. I think about half of our backers actually chose our developer edition. So they've identified as people who like to code, people who are techie, maybe remote workers. And so that's my audience. That's who I am, and excited to talk about it.
What was the inspiration behind this? Because I love the idea, and I do think as well, like you mentioned, it's quite overwhelming, right? The doom scrolling. What was really the inspiration for you personally behind wanting to focus your attention on this?
Well, I like how you ended that with the word attention and focus. I've spent the last several years always kind of not focused, like objectively not in a focused state. My sort of day job is running a small portfolio of SaaS companies. And so since 2016, 2017, that's when I became a full-time entrepreneur, I've always had, I guess, multiple jobs. I've been the founder of this and the marketer at that and fixing bugs at that and doing support tickets at this other thing. And I've had to get really good at context switching, whether that's, keeping 8 email inboxes open at once or sort of scheduling my days around, okay, I'm going to do project A in the morning, project B at night, or on Fridays, I'm only going to work on this company. And I've gotten pretty good at it, or as good as you can be, given I don't think this is aligned with human nature. But every one of these streaks, all of us have been really good at something that isn't forever. We've been really good at, dieting or working out every day or whatever it is that you want to make more of a habit in your life. It doesn't usually last forever. And for me, that whole ability to context switch and do a lot of things without feeling stress kind of started to break down last fall in 2023. And at that time, I thought, I'm just doing too much stuff. I'm jumping between all these projects. Whether it's my phone or my computer, everything's just filled up with like Slack messages and emails. And am I doing something wrong? Am I not good at this anymore? And I actually resolved to just go get a regular 9-to-5 job. That was what I thought I needed to be less cluttered, to have less chaos in my schedule. And so I applied to a couple jobs. I don't even have a LinkedIn account. I don't have a resume. So I quickly threw together some stuff I've done, bullet points, applied to a couple jobs, had maybe 2 interviews. They weren't the right fit for me or for them. And thought, okay, maybe I don't need a job. Maybe actually I just want to kind of be more focused. And so my next move was quitting social media. I first spent a few days just unfollowing anything related to news, whether it was on my YouTube or Twitter. And then I thought, no, that's not enough. I'm just going to totally, go cold turkey. So I quit Twitter. I deleted Netflix, just lots of content media. I thought, okay, I'll just reduce the content I'm seeing. That will reduce my stress. I don't need a job. And that kind of worked. But now suddenly I'm not catching up with my homies, right? I'm not staying up to date on things that are interesting. Not, what's happening in politics. That's kind of not interesting. But what are new cool things coming out? What are even just I don't know, funny memes. I was now
Memes.
starved
Yeah, I was
of,
gonna say memes.
right? It's like I threw out the baby with the bathwater in this attempt to have more focus and control. So I thought, okay, well, maybe there's like a third iteration. It isn't quitting working. It isn't getting a job. It isn't being a hermit, right? And I was even reminded of one of the chapters in 48 Laws of Power, where essentially a couple times in history, mythical, historical, fiction, as well as real life, dating back to ancient China, you have examples where kings thought, or they got a little paranoid and they thought, I'm just going to be alone, or I'm going to build a castle around myself, or I'm just going to kind of have full privacy, or I'm going to bug out. And that's
Right.
how,
Go full monk mode.
right? Yeah, exactly. Monk mode. But then actually monk mode makes you more vulnerable to attack. And I think in one of the anecdotes in Robert Greene's book, he mentions, I think this was ancient China, I can't recall, but essentially the guy builds this castle around him and then he gets sick and then they can't get in to save him.
Ooh.
It's so it's an, you know, it's sort of a metaphor. I don't know if that's real, but I thought, okay, so I can't just delete everything, right? The world keeps turning, whether you pretend to
Yeah,
be.
we're all interconnected.
Exactly. So it's like, what's that minimum viable connection? And that's what I started asking myself. And all of this stuff, whether it was deciding, hey, I'm stressed, applying for jobs, all of this happened in like a 7 to 14 day period. Quitting Twitter, sending a newsletter out saying, hey, see you later, to people that kind of knew. Within that 7 to 14 days, this is just all I consume myself with, is what's the minimum viable amount of connection. And then I start thinking about it and it's like, well, I've been having all these people over at my house lately. At that time, they were coming over to learn to code. They were coming over to just help me out on projects. I do a lot of DIY stuff and have friends fly in. And when they bring over their laptops, they set up these kind of interesting, sophisticated systems. Like they have, you know, the laptop stand, the ergonomic keyboard, and I'm not necessarily saying all
Now you
this
have
stuff
walking
is necessary.
desk. Yeah, you got so much, whiz bang things you can attach to that.
That whole category, right? And I honestly own like none of that. I have a Stream Deck, which I do really like, and I've had that just for a year or two. That's my first and only like desk gadget. But seeing these people come over and introduced me to this world of like, like work doesn't have to suck that much. You know, people have started to put their heads together and find these tools and gadgets that can give you that extra 1, 10, 20%, whether it's productivity, whether it's just reducing your stress, you know, even a nice chair, right, can just like make your workday better, even though it's a fully mechanical thing. There's nothing special about it, but you put all this stuff together and boom, you can have a workstation that is just conducive to better work, right?
What I love about that is kind of like you slowly coming to the realization of, this is a major problem for other people. And it's also something that you want to solve and contribute, right? When it comes to bringing something new into the world.
Exactly. And so then, combining these experiences and like nascent, recent, whatever memories was like, wait a second, I can maybe mash this all up or synthesize some new solution here. It's like, okay, well, maybe I can make a gadget, something physical that helps you stay focused. And I didn't want to get into the productivity realm. I think productivity is kind of a dirty word these days. Sometimes people seem to sacrifice productivity for family or love or health or whatever. And there's a lot of people who are very successful that aren't necessarily the most productive. So obviously there's more to it than productivity. It's not even a good enough it's not a North Star qualifying, attribute.
Yeah, it sounds like it's more of like minimizing interruptions, right? And really minimizing the things that you don't care about, right? Just really focusing on what you do care about.
Exactly. So it's like, okay, so we're not going to be a productivity device, but what about focus? What about just not being, like you said, distracted? Because all of that stuff breeds, the second order consequence of those things is distractions breed stress, right? And then you have stress over things you haven't done or that you have to do, and anxiety. So it's like, what can we, how can we chip away at that?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So how long were you working on this product before you eventually unveiled it on Kickstarter? How long were you working on it?
Yeah, I'm not super proud to talk timeline, but let's talk timeline. So, because generally I move very quickly, but hardware is a different beast altogether. So a little context on me, I particularly, not a claim to fame, so to speak, but something that I feel comfortable sharing, professionally, is that I can build and iterate things very quickly. So I have multiple live streams on YouTube where I'll build an entire SaaS app in like 12 hours straight, talking out loud the whole time. And then I'll give the app away to somebody. I have coding courses. I try to always kind of get to the essence of something, whether that's, a product, a feature, an MVP, and ship quickly. And so back to last October, in November 2023, as these week or two went by and kind of figured out, okay, let's make something that helps you focus. It's like, okay, well, maybe I just need a few weeks, right, to build it like normal. Wrong. So first of all, it was hardware. So now suddenly I had to go to Micro Center to get started. I couldn't just get started on my computer. So, okay, I go to Micro Center. I drive an hour and a half each way. They don't have what I need. I go to another Micro Center. I come back with hundreds of dollars of Raspberry Pis and screens and, little screwdrivers with the torque bit on them. And it was funny. And then I go on Amazon. I start buying more stuff and adapters and breadboards. And then I'm reading articles on Arduino and Raspberry Pi and MicroPython and just getting a whole, drinking from the fire hose, how to get started in devices and hardware. And so that took me another week or two, but I had a working prototype. So by November, I had a screen, I had a microcontroller, and my screen was showing me content on this black and white e-ink, display. And it was content from a web server that I had built on my computer. It was all local. Nothing was live on the internet yet. I don't even think I had source control or GitHub or anything, but I had that v0.01 working. And then the next thing was, well, now how do I make this real? So that began a process of recruiting engineers. I needed a hardware engineer. I needed an industrial designer to help me make a case, an enclosure. And I needed someone to help write firmware, not in a high-level language like Ruby or Python, but in a low-level language that's more conducive to, going directly on a piece of hardware. And so it took another few weeks to recruit those people. Fast forward now, December, January, we had a PCB designed. We had some parts sourced. I raised a tiny bit of money from some friends. And then, by February, we filmed a commercial. So we had like 2 prototypes and we hired an agency, shipped them the prototypes out to Austin, Texas. They filmed really, really high fidelity commercial using the real product. We didn't have to do like renders and stuff like that. And then by March, we had we had like 20 products working in my house with a case from a manufacturer.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. And that's super fast as well, I'd say, when it comes to hardware, especially with, electronics components. Like, that's incredible for sure.
Well, thank you. I mean, looking back at now, it's been 8 months or so, and we are live and we're wrapping up our Kickstarter campaign. So it does feel like a long time. Like it's going to have been a full year from idea conception to like having some reviews in and everything smoothed out. So, a bit humbling compared to building an app over a weekend. But from what I hear from other people, like relatively quickly, we were able to at least get, the V1. And then between April, May, June, we were doing pre-launch marketing. So we built up a landing page. We drove ads to that. We collected emails. We did a VIP, $1 per lead opt-in, which we had a good conversion rate for that. And we can talk more about that. And then once we felt that our list, our candidate prospect list was, large enough and sufficiently engaged through, the newsletter metrics, that's when we went live for a 30-day campaign on Kickstarter. And now we have like 7 days left in that campaign.
If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured, I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillrite, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist, and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist, fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately. So yeah, just to unpack that, because there's a lot of elements here. I mean, number one, it sounds like you spent a lot of time on getting really good collateral and media assets and video and stuff you could work with, right? Which is incredible. And you mentioned this idea of the pre-launch, right? Which we can talk about in just a second. But one question I did have for you was, in spending 8 months or whatever it is, leading up to the launch, what was kind of going through your head like the night before you went live with this project on Kickstarter?
I guess the usual, will this go to zero? Will anybody care? And that's kind of always the big question when you have a new idea. And I say specifically new idea, not to pat myself on the back, but to really help start bifurcating what our ideas look like. I've had plenty of ideas that weren't new. They were iterations on something that was out there. So the question wasn't, will anybody care or does anybody need this? Because the market's already demonstrated that people need that type of solution. So let's say you want to make a chatbot or a customer service tool or, a product review app for Shopify, right? These are demonstrated needs. And so the night before launching something like that, it isn't, do people need this? It's, should I exist? Should my version, should my take on this requirement exist?
Right.
Does it have a place in the market? But this with terminals, like, it didn't exist. There are some cool e-ink things out there, but they do like one thing, right? They'll show you stock prices, or they'll show you, obviously Kindle, right? It shows you a book, right? It shows you text.
Yeah.
And what we were trying to do is build more of a platform where you can see anything you want, from your Google Analytics to your Google Calendar. I shouldn't have said to Google products, but you know what I mean. And so when you have the new idea,
it's an unknown.
just go, okay.
I said it's an unknown, like it's a mystery of how that's going to be received. And, it's great to hear, I think, as well, just in being candid that way, that even though you had iterated very quickly, you had all your ducks in a row, you had a wait list of people, you still felt a little bit of anxiety. I think people will really resonate with that when it comes to that.
For sure. And I think it's probably a silly fool's errand to say, okay, I have this anxiety about this upcoming launch. Let me pull XYZ levers to like remove the anxiety, because that's always going to kind of be there. I think if you're a self-aware person, in fact, if you're the night before launch and you have zero anxiety, I think you have a character flaw, right?
Sociopath.
Which is that, hey, I'm right. I'm the oracle. I know what the market wants. And the thing is you might counter that and say, well, what if this person has done this 10 times before and they've launched other successful things? And it's like, well, that's me. To be honest, I've launched a bunch of things that have done really well, but each time you still have to go, okay, well, but maybe this time isn't going to be like last time. You still have to have that green mindset so that you can learn. And maybe that means quickly iterating. Maybe that means shutting it down like really, really quickly. In fact, I had an idea like that a year ago. We don't need to talk about it, but it was a web app idea. I had the idea in a stroke of, I don't know, I was just sitting down and just had the idea. I thought it was the greatest idea I'd had in like 4 years, like the greatest single idea sentence in 4 years. I tweeted about it. I started hyping it up. I started hinting at it. Hey, I'm going to be building this new thing. It's my best idea I've ever had. And then I shipped it and instantly got punched in the face by people who were like, this doesn't work for me for these reasons. And that was a good moment for me. That was a really good moment for me because, again, this was after 9 years of building and launching web apps and doing startup stuff and generally knowing how to, put the pieces together. I can write the code, I can do the copywriting, I can do the marketing. And I still really missed the mark big time. And this was last year.
Yeah, that's such an incredible lesson. There's a great saying, I think it was maybe William Faulkner. He said, you have to kill your darlings, right? Which is sometimes like when you really fall in love with an idea, but it just doesn't work, right? And that's one of the hardest things to do, for sure. So to kind of, rewind the clock just a tiny bit. So you mentioned this idea of a pre-launch. We have a lot of people listening who might not be aware of what that is. Would you mind just going through that a tiny bit of what you meant by that?
So to take a step back really on crowdfunding generally, I think a lot of us have this perception of, let's say something like Kickstarter, which I believe was really the first major solution out there, as you go on there and you put some decent photos or mock-ups, you tell your story ideally with the video, because that's, got all these different senses that you're activating, oral and all of that. And then, if people like it, they give you all this money and the rest is history. And we've all seen some really cool companies, like long-term staying power companies, get their start on crowdfunding. But over the years, and I think that was the original vision, but over the years, Kickstarter and others, I'm not blaming them, became a target for fraudsters, right? Just like NFTs, they're cool, but some people who did NFTs are fraudsters. Play to earn was cool, but some people did it to just rug pull and take all of your money and not build a game. Same happened on crowdfunding. And so crowdfunding, the strategy to run a successful campaign, has a couple things have happened. One, it's gotten a little more regulated. So for example, when you go on Kickstarter and you try to make a campaign, their team will manually review everything you submit. And they told me, hey, we need like raw photos from your phone showing the product. We don't want renders. We don't want this. We want you to make a video walking through the device, rotating it 360 degrees in your hand. It's like, okay, cool. So it's more regulated. So you kind of can't just start with an idea anymore. That's one big change. You have to put a little more skin in the game, I think, and you got to get a prototype before you start. But then the second thing that's changed in crowdfunding over the last few years is that we no longer have this fantasy, post what you have and wish for the best and the algorithm gods will take care of you. You now have to kind of already have an audience. And to a lot of people, this is a scary concept. And we hear this in startups generally, in tech generally. If you go on social media, people will say, well, the best way to launch your product isn't to like make the product first and then launch. It's to, attract hundreds or thousands of like-minded people who trust your opinion generally and then launch. And people say, well, I can't like go back in time 5 years and start my Twitter after college. Like what should I do? And the same thing kind of applies to Kickstarter, but the difference, and this is a huge benefit. Here's the good news with crowdfunding. The benefit of doing a crowdfunding campaign versus, let's say, launching a SaaS tool tomorrow and not having that audience is that crowdfunding, e-commerce, gadgets, things that you can, buy for $99, they are super conducive to paid media. So you can run a performance ad campaign on, the biggest platforms in the world, Facebook, et cetera, and you can predictably and scalably drive eyeballs who are in your audience. And then some percentage of those people will say, yeah, here's my email, and you can build that lead list. And so essentially it's a little bit of and this is the less romantic part, I think, of crowdfunding that I've learned over just the last couple of months. It's a little bit of a money in, money out game. You put, let's say, 10 grand into the machine. You have an idea, you get it approved by your crowdfunding platform of choice. You put 10 grand, let's say, into the machine, and you might start getting emails for $2 an email, or 3 or 5 or 10 or $15 an email. And now you say, okay, I spent 10 grand and 712 people have opted in to stay updated for when my product goes live. And that list size and that whole process of getting those email leads and essentially paying for them through, the ad platforms out there, that's what we would call a pre-launch campaign. And that's how you can, build your audience, even if you are a nobody. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Even if you are not active on social media, let's say, you don't have to be great at writing or have a cool profile photo or have like a big newsletter. If you can afford to do this pre-launch machine, it's a pretty well-oiled strategy that I think a lot of agencies and individual contributors are starting to adopt as pretty much, I think, the new, I don't know how new, but the best practice in crowdfunding generally is that before you click play on your 30-day campaign, you actually do that pre-campaign where you're pointing people to just like a static web page with an email opt-in box. And so that's what we did. This was at the advice, again, of the agency we hired, who also got us our commercial and just gave us a lot of great advice generally, how to think through our pricing, how to think through add-ons, upsells. Obviously copywriting is critical when you're trying to get someone's attention and help them make a decision within a few seconds. And so this agency guided us through this. Everything I'm saying now is new knowledge to me. But I think I'm somewhat accurately
I definitely think, well, first of all, I do think going out there with a new product, trying to build a brand, it's part art, like as you mentioned, that romantic aspect, and it's also part science. And making sure you get the science right when it comes to the working of the product, but also on the marketing side is so incredibly important. So I do appreciate you for sharing that. And to me, it sounds like this idea of doing a pre-launch is not just about building a huge wait list of people and having the metrics, but also those people are really probably on the edge of their seat, right? And are excited about being able to participate in something new, which is pretty cool. So definitely appreciate you for sharing that. Just to kind of make sure we do have a time. I want to make sure that I'm mindful of your time. One other quick follow up I had here is in going live with this campaign. You've obviously been pretty successful so far. Have you had any moments that were a surprise to you? Maybe an audience member being excited that you didn't expect, or a certain demographic that really liked this that you didn't expect. Do you have any surprises or anything like that that happened?
Honestly, there have almost been nothing but surprises. First surprise, which I guess is positive or neutral maybe, is what is the percentage of our backers who are developers and who are technical and who want to build their own plugins, or who want to, they're asking about open sourcing things. And I expected that to be maybe sub 10% of our customers, because part of that whole 6, 7, 8 month build process was trying to refine every little detail from the web UI to the case design so that it was specifically friendly to non-technical people. Just like, a Stream Deck, right? You can program a plugin on your Stream Deck, but guess what? Stream Deck was made for streamers, not for programmers. And so that's been a surprise. And I hesitate to say it's a positive surprise for sure, because when you have mostly developers as your customer, and this is regardless of what your product is, if most of your customers are developers, they have more rigid technical specifications and requirements than non-developer customers, right? So if you have like a software tool for developers, they're going to expect a status page with 99.79 uptime, and they're going to want to have alerts of incidents. Whereas if you have a product that normal people use, your website can crash and you can just put a little fail whale that says we'll be back soon, right? Mm-hmm. Developers will say, well, this is unacceptable. And so it's a neutral surprise, but it's been interesting, and we are capitalizing on it as much as we can. We have already actually open sourced a bunch of code over the last couple of weeks, specifically in response to, or as a direct response to, the overwhelming developer interest. I think like 40 or 50% of our pre-orders on Kickstarter are developers. And I know that because they're actually paying extra for the developer edition.
Right.
So that's been a surprise. Another surprise is, honestly, and this is, again, kind of humbling and just good to remind myself as a product maker for all these years, is there are people who look at as far as I know, they look at our campaign page, they read all the content, they look at our updates. We've been posting on social, trying to be as transparent as possible about the whole operation, what the product does, what it doesn't do. And then they still don't really get it. So they say, so does this have a keyboard? So can I watch videos on this? Is there a speaker that can chime whenever new content gets displayed? And it's like, no. I mean, it's like they're asking for things, or not necessarily always asking. Sometimes they just assume that we will do things that are actually totally antithetical to the whole purpose of our product. So that's been interesting. And it's easy to get frustrated when you get, every day we're getting DMs and public comments, and people are talking about us now on the Reddit, on the e-ink subreddit. And, you're navigating all of this and going like, am I wrong? Are they right? Do they know something I don't know about, how this thing ought to work? Or like, you have to always balance your convictions and your point of view and what got you into this project with customer expectations. And so it's not always the case the customer's right. It's not always the case the customer's wrong. And that almost makes it more tough. They're sometimes right. And to know which times you have to use your judgment, and judgment is something we have to spend years and years developing, but then your launch is like a 30-day thing. So you're trying to put forth years of judgment into a few weeks of make or break moments and updates, and we'll do this, and no, we won't do that kind of commentary.
Yeah, that's such an important lesson in understanding that use case and how it evolves, right? So a lot of important decisions, and I think it's great you got that kind of feedback as well. So I do have one or two more questions for you here. My first question is kind of based on your story, which is, in thinking about this, you've gone from being able to code a whole plethora of web apps and moving from that world into hardware, and you've been crushing it on the business side. What has this really meant to you to be able to connect with this base of over 1,000 people all over the world? What has it really meant to you to have this campaign be successful?
It's kind of, in startup terms, given me a bit of my mojo back, to be honest, because most of my work over the last few years was not starting things. It was buying existing products that were already doing well and then, improving them, whether, fixing bugs, adding features, making it look nicer, amping up the marketing. But there's something, it's a different skill set, I think, to edit versus to write. Everybody's an editor. Nobody's a writer. And so when I spent years, buying things that already worked and making them better, I didn't get as much personal satisfaction out of it because it didn't feel like I was going all the way. And I also think there's an objective component to that too. It's not the same, that I think as a society in general, we should give more credit to the founders and the creators of things, not, the PE firms that come in, cut costs, and apply their formulas to juicing out more profit. And so, but I was that person the last few years. I primarily didn't start things. I didn't get to be as creative. And I did second guess myself a little bit, what if I were to launch something from zero? Would it have the same kind of success as when I just come in and, pull levers on already working things? And so seeing this launch go well has been inspiring for me. Definitely gotten a lot of, personal satisfaction out of just going, like this was an idea in my head. And obviously thanks to a lot of people. I think there's actually 9 people on the Terminal team. So worth mentioning, I'm not some solo guy here. We have a 9-person team, designers, engineers, front end, back end, et cetera. But you have an idea in your head, and a few months later, over 1,000 people around the world have paid for it. It's definitely gotten me pumped up. And
so cool.
But yeah, I think I needed that. Financial stuff aside, I needed to see that could still start something, because those haven't been the muscles I've been flexing over the last few years.
Very cool. I have one more question, but before we do, where can people go to learn more about Terminal? Where can they go to check out the Kickstarter and also see the designs? Really beautiful. Where can they go to learn more about this?
Thank you. So if you catch this while we're still live on a crowdfunding platform, you can go to Kickstarter or even Indiegogo and type in TRMNL, so terminal without the vowels, or you can go to useterminal.com with the same spelling.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to include that link in the show notes. My final question for you, and we can end on this note. We can either end with a quote that you like. We can end with a word of encouragement for other creators and inventors in the audience, or a final tip about crowdfunding. And we can end on that note.
I hesitate to give tips on crowdfunding because I am beside myself just watching this campaign do well. But I would say, going back to what I do know more about, which is software and iterating and keeping it real with customers, that whatever your process looks like, if you're tinkering with an idea, you want to be documenting it, whether that's snapping pics on your phone, whether that's just putting random ideas into a Google Doc. You want to be documenting it, because what I've found that I think transcends the product itself is that people are hungry for story, and they're hungry for the reasons why, and they're hungry for just something that feels authentic and real. And I think that's what we've done best with this crowdfunding campaign. And but to get that done, you have to do it every day. So every time you're thinking about or working on your idea, make notes, take photos, and that will give you some really rich assets to share when you're ready to launch. And that's how you're going to differentiate from the knockoffs and the rug pulls and the fraudsters, is that you have something real to back up whatever it is that you're making.
Well said, Ryan. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And good luck with your remaining days here on Kickstarter.
Thank you, Salvador. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Brigman, and my man, I think that we got nuggets of gold from this episode. And if you agree, give me a positive rating and review on iTunes so that other people know that this show is worth their time. We got tons of great reviews, and it's really, to me, a badge of honor that many of the listeners get value out of the podcast. And that's exactly why I produce it, right? I continue to put out these shows, and I have since 2015, so many, many years. The reason why is for people just like you, for listeners just like you. I love having listeners listen to the podcast, come back on as a success story, as a testament to the fact that what we're doing here, the time we're spending on this really is worthwhile and valuable for you. So first of all, leave a positive rating and review. In addition, many times I'll have a student who comes to me and they're like, Sal, I want to get this out there, but I just don't know how, right? And I know I can learn as much as I can possibly cram into my brain, but I'm still always going to be having skill gaps. I don't know what I don't know. I'm good at some things, but I need help with others. And I'm just not exactly sure if I'm dotting my I's, crossing my T's, and building that strong foundation to be able to do what you say, which is to blow past your funding goal when you go live with the crowdfunding campaign. I just want to make sure it goes right because you're spending so much time on this sucker, right? Sometimes you're spending years building this product, and you want to make sure when you finally unveil it to the world that it is a worthwhile experience, and you just suck the marrow out of that launch and you do everything possible. You don't want to have any holds barred. You don't want to say you regret anything, right, at the end of that process. If that sounds like you and you're ready to invest in yourself, you're ready to invest in the journey, you're ready to invest in moving forward and leveling up in your life, and you just want to have a guide who can share with you not only the success that goes into the campaign and really analyze what you've been doing up until this point in time, points out maybe some of the things you're not aware of when it comes to crowdfunding. Go out there and looks through, for example, your category itself and shows you, hey, if you make one or two minor adjustments to your strategy, this is the profound impact that it could have. I use these, what I call intensive individual one-on-one coaching sessions, to really dive into the library in my head to pull out what you need to know when it comes to your specific category, your specific product, your specific resources and budget limitations, etc., in order to actually, how do you pull this off in a big way? And if you're interested in learning more about this individual one-on-one coaching call option that I have for you, I have a lot of students who book individual one-off calls, and I have other students that are looking for more long-term options, and some who are looking for executional help. Wherever you fall on the map, whether you're doing this campaign in 6 months from now or in 2 weeks, I definitely would go and learn a little bit more about this while you still have the time at crowdcrux.com/coaching. That link is crowdcrux.com/coaching. You can watch the video that I have there for you, which I put up recently. And you can learn more about what I offer with my individual one-on-one coaching sessions at crowdcrux.com/coaching. But regardless, I do hope that you've taken some value out of today's session. And if nothing else, it's really helped orient you to what is possible. You can be doing one thing, you're going down one path in life, all of a sudden you wake up to what you really want to do with your life. You make a minor direction shift, and all of a sudden you're going down this other path, right? And you've heard from how today's guest, you can do that in a matter of months, in a matter of weeks. It really depends on your category, but you can do it, my friends, if that's something that you're interested in doing. Thank you so much. My name is Salvador Brigman. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next time.